Of course, I'm East Coast, which is why it's 12 o'clock, depending upon where you are. It's going to be around about that time. Let me do a check-in real quickly with the Bill Highway staff. Are we ready to rock and roll? Yes, all good to go. Excellent. Awesome. This is my first time being with all of you here, leading this webinar for Bill Highway. So I'm wildly excited to be part of the Bill Highway team for this. And we're going to have a great conversation today talking about how to train, support, and inspire chapter leaders in one place. We got you warmed up a little bit on the chat, so I want to make sure that you know that the chat is really the place for us to take the conversation that's happening on the screen and add all those cool elements to it. I know, and I've seen a bunch of you here, I know a lot of you actually do this training, supporting and inspiring chapters around a chapter leadership conference. So you guys have lots of ideas, and what we're trying to do at this point really is give you a few ideas to add to those and then hopefully pull out some of the good ideas that you have. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get ourselves started. So first of all, I'm Peggy Hoffman with Mariner Management and Marketing. We are a boutique association management company, which means we're home to 3 organizations, which are state-based and chapter organizations. And so I get an opportunity to, I say, you know, do what I preach, or walk the talk maybe, because as exec director for PRSA Maryland, we're constantly looking at ways to how do I inspire the chapter leaders. But I'm only here because this crew with Bill Highway, who is staying on the mute, but they will be here if we need their help in any way. They're the real brains behind all of this. And I know that they don't have their video on, but if you could see them, they are an awesome team. And really, if you've got chapters, they've got solutions. Now, they suggested and came up with this idea for this webinar because what they've been hearing in their roundtables that they hold in several areas, and you'll see the calendar at the end, several areas around the country, they've been hearing that people are asking the question of how do we create chapter leadership programs that can make a real difference? I mean, we know that our leaders are incredibly dedicated volunteers, but they're not association managers. Not that we want them to be association managers, but it does mean that they can be overwhelmed by their association leadership duties. And so part of what we get the opportunity to do is to build their knowledge muscle, but also help them build a network that allows them to be as successful as possible. And so that's the reason why we've come today to talk about this one kind of event or one kind of a way that we can get involved and engaged. I'm going to ask you to get on the chat on this. Do you currently run a chapter leadership conference? So just throw in that chat box. Let us know, is it yes? If you do something a little bit differently. So for example, let's say, for example, that you do one, but you don't do it annually. Maybe you do it every other year, or maybe you don't do one full, maybe you break it out and you do 3 regionals. I love it. Like, and give us information like Laurie did, more of a workshop kind of thing. I love this, Jen, about doing 3 different things this year. I love that idea of taking a national event and breaking it into regional events. At Leadership Day tied to Lobby Day, great. So lots of cool ideas. Did you know that when we did a chapter leadership chapter benchmarking study last year, we found that about 52% of associations responding said that they do a full event. And the other folks pretty much said they did it as an add-on to a conference, or maybe they do a series of workshops. But almost 60% of folks said they're doing some kind of face-to-face event or activity, which really gives us, excuse me, which really gives us a lot of ideas to pull from, as long as we can, as long as we get a chance to share. Thank you, Carolyn. I just saw that shout out. I appreciate hearing that. So here's the deal. We're going to share some ideas, but all of you have ideas. That's why I asked you this warm-up question. I'm going to ask you that as we make points here, continue to take the point and apply it to your own event or activity and throw it in there. If you've got a question, throw those in there too. I've got the folks at Bill Highway. They're going to help us take a look at those questions and help us answer it. So let's dive in. First of all, what's our agenda? We're going to take the day and we're going to put it in 4 parts. We're going to talk about benefits and obstacles to overcome. I had a great conversation today with Jennifer Steffen from NIGP, and I'll tell you more about that. But, you know, one thing we talked about is how do you get the volunteer leaders to give their time and sometimes money out of their own pocket to get there. We're going to talk about that. Then we're going to talk about building the conference agenda. How do you design the experience? And what are some options for finding speakers and facilitators? Then, and I think this is really important because we have to be able to get that ROI justified, right? How do we get national, your board, your C-suite, the folks to say it's important? So let's talk about what that means from a national perspective. And finally, how do we help our leaders turn ideas into actions? You know, one of the worst things we can do is put a lot of planning and opportunity into a 1-day or 2-day event and have them have basically what I call Chinese food, in that they hear stuff, but they don't know what to do with it. So how can we change that? Let's begin by diving right into this critical question that we have, which is, you know, what is the benefits to the organization? How do we make sure that we can create this ROI? So I think you guys know these things, but let me articulate them and write down these as notes. So if you haven't thought of using this with the staff, you can. So first and foremost, it's an investment in the future. If you're going to spend time expecting things from your chapter leaders, then you have to spend time and money to make sure you set them up for success. It's not good enough to say our chapters are so important because they do member engagement and that they're our next generation of leaders, and then not make sure that that happens, right? That's the investment. The second is to build relationships and communities. So here's the deal. I don't know how many of you have a full staff to do this, to work with your chapter leaders. Many of us are in 1, 2, maybe 4-person staff offices. You can't do everything that your chapter leaders need. So part of what you really need to be able to do is to build their community and their network so that you can be, you know, there can be many of you all around town. Finally, it's to strengthen the national and the chapter together, to deepen that relationship, to bring that alignment. How many of us have had a situation where you got chapters and they're all using different kinds of logos, or they're speaking about the membership value differently, or they're doing even worse things counter? Well, part of the problem is that unless we bring them together and they see it's a partnership, they are more likely to, as we say, go farm. It helps you scout out future leaders as well. Now, future leaders, I mean, this is an important part of how an association builds its leadership muscle. You take folks for which their impact is got a slightly more limit, right? So instead of decisions they're making around a national board or a global board, it's a decision they're making around the state board or the local board. And they get a chance to better understand and get better at decision making. So this is actually an investment in your future national leaders. Finally, it's really an opportunity for you to hear more from your chapters, to listen, to figure out where to put support. So I ask you, those are 5 things that we came up with for benefits for hosting a chapter leadership conference. Talk to us. What are some of the benefits you found in hosting a chapter leadership conference? And while I'm doing that, I'm going to mention that someone has said, hey, for those who do webinars, would you be willing to share outlines for content? And I'm going to suggest absolutely share outlines for content. So anything else that you've picked up? So investment for the future, building relationships and communities, strengthening national chapters, scouting out future leaders, listen, identify, support. Cultivating volunteers, absolutely, Nancy. That is what it's really a great opportunity. To highlight chapter successes. Yes, exactly, because if you're highlighting chapter successes, then you're modeling the kinds of behavior that you want. So while we're thinking about the benefits, it's important for us to understand that while there are benefits, there's still obstacles that we have to overcome to encourage participation. So I was talking, as I mentioned, with Jennifer Steffen. Now, I am very excited. At the end of this month, I'm going to get to be a leader at a leadership conference. So I am on the Talent Council, which is a national governing board for NIGP, which is the Institute for Government Procurement. And as a leader, I get to come to their chapter leadership program. There's lots of wonderful things. I'm going to blog about it after I go because I get to be immersed as a participant. But one thing we talked about was how exciting it is for her. She really wanted to see the conference become a must-attend event, if you will. She wanted the buzz around that, and she wanted the experience to be so rich and so dynamic that people really wanted to come. And what she talked about was over this period of about 5-ish years as she was developing this, her goal was to make sure that it was an exclusive program that they heard about and they wanted to come. And she's found now that each and every year, her attendance has gone up on their regular conference call, chapter their conference calls. They talk about their excitement about getting the registration and getting there. It's increased attendance. This year, they're going to have 55 of the 73 chapters. They're going to have 74 leaders involved in their meeting. They've overcome the obstacles by demonstrating the excitement and the experience. But they've also done a couple of things that we regularly recommend. So let's say, for example, it's dealing with the finance issue. It's dealing with what's keeping people from being involved. Oftentimes, it's the dollars, right? So are you offering some kind of a subsidy? Are you doing something that allows people to be able to cover the cost? So one of the things that NIGP does, for example, is that first of all, when they set their registration fee, it includes the 2 nights of hotel and their food. All they're doing is picking up the travel. But then, right on their site, they have an opportunity for to click to apply for a subsidy, where they'll pick up that cost of that registration. So it will give you some more dollars to get there, right? Other folks I have seen, they will pay for they'll pay for the hotel room, they'll pay for the expenses when you're in the city, and again, you have to come there. Lots of different ways. So Jill is saying that she covers hotel and food and beverage to encourage them to, and I love this, encourages them to budget early in the year. How do you help with subsidies or scholarships to make this a reality? I was talking to someone else last week, and a large part of the way they help to offset the cost so that they can bring more attendees is they use sponsorships that just remove dollars from the equation. And there's lots of really cool ways, actually, that you can do sponsorship. You can go out to some of your affinity partners. Let's say, for example, that you have a AMS that you work with, or maybe you have a communications package that you work with. Can they offer sponsorships? Maybe they can offer sponsorships, travel sponsorships. Maybe they can cover the cost of food and beverage so you can lower the registration. We have to deal with the money because way too often what we're seeing is that people have to pay for this out of their own pocket. I love that Ruth Bloom says that they pay everything for 1 board per chapter if they haven't already attended twice. That's really great. That's encouraging other people. So keep telling us how you are making this more affordable for your leaders while I talk about the other big obstacle, which is the ability to get time off. Wow. This is a big issue, I know. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a room just last weekend in New Orleans with a group, and one of the folks said, yeah, took personal time. It's like, that's a big investment. If you've got kids and family and you get 2 to 3 weeks of vacation and you're taking 2 of your days for your chapter volunteer leadership proposal, people are going to say, not so sure. So we have to understand that helping them make that decision that it's valuable, or a way to offset so they can go back to their office and say, I know that you view this as personal time, but I'm actually doing professional development, so therefore at least let me take a regular day. One way of doing that is adding continuing education credits. I love that NTMA, the chapter leadership that I worked with just the other weekend, does this. You see the CAE mark on the sessions that we did. This was an opportunity because they had chapter exec directors there to be able to give credit to those chapter execs to make it worthwhile. NIGP, when you come to this event and do all the events, you get 11 continuation credits towards their professional certification. That's a big deal. Now, maybe not for everyone, but it may be all that a leader needs to do to say, I don't want to use my personal time. I'd like this to be my regular office time. That may be the one thing that allows somebody to get that time off. The other thing that happens is permission to attend, because it's not unusual for me to hear that volunteer leaders can take time off, but how in the heck can they make this qualification? How can they get their office, their supervisor, their agency to figure this out? And one of the things that you can do is actually put together a good example, a letter that you can let them be able to hand on. This is what we did for CEX last year, because we knew people had to get out of the office to be able to get permission to get out of the office to be able to spend a day with us. And that was just a day, but now imagine if you're asking someone to spend 2.5 or 3 days with you for a chapter leadership conference. So maybe it's time for you to consider putting together a letter that helps people make that justification. So let's remove the obstacles and encourage participation. All right, I'm going to get you guys to warm up those fingers once again. A rating poll. If you had a scale of 1 to 5, how many stars would you give your chapter leadership conference? Would you give it 1 as in, we do it, but I can't say it gets anything and nobody really comes? Can you say it's a 5? Like with NIGP, where we're doing amazing things, we get great reviews from the people, and we've had increasing number of attendees. And here's the other thing: are you getting sponsors? Are your Findy partners excited and interested to be there? Are your staff finding value in it? Okay, so we got a couple. We got a 4.5 for this past year. I love it. A 4, typically a 3, but this year we're going for 5. Sandra, awesome. A 4, a 3, a 4.5. This is great. So those of you that are giving yourself good stars, start typing in what makes these a good star so we can steal those hints as well. And while we do that, let's recognize that a huge part of that is the experience that we give our folks. The experience is so important, and this is the essence of what the conversation Jennifer from NIGP and I had, was this idea of an experience from start to finish. So a couple of thoughts about that. First of all, the session content should align with the chapter and national critical pain points. Now, the question you might have is, okay, so how do I find out what those pain points are? We think we sort of know intuitively what the thoughts are, but one of the things I love about what NIGP has done, and I've actually seen this done by many of you, so a lot of you might already do this, but they have a discussion in their chapter leadership forum community in which they said, we're going to do speed networking on key points and extreme networking on key points. What do you want the topics to be? So they're vetting the topics. I've seen organizations go out with a survey ahead of time, which is awesome. So make sure you understand the critical pain points, but then hold up those critical pain points against all the other stuff that you're doing and say, what are the pain points that a face-to-face opportunity will allow us to uniquely address? The second thing is, don't assume you've identified every topic. And this gets back to doing that polling. But the other thing to do is, maybe you should go, if you've got a chapter leader forum, like with PRSA, we have a chapter leader forum, have you mined that to see what people are talking about, either on a positive side or a pain point side? Have you actually looked at what the questions people are asking? But not only that, not only the question they ask, but are you looking at which of those discussions are getting the most traction? Create a conference advisory board made up of former and existing chapter leaders. I like the existing chapter leaders. The formers sometimes are, because they're a national, sometimes they have a bigger scope, but put together an advisory board. So one of the cool things we did last year, for those of you who are familiar with the component, the CEX Sexy party that we had last year, the one-day event, which, by the way, is coming up in October 26th, 2018. Anyway, we had an experience squad. That was we leaned on them for session ideas, for feedback on messaging, for helping us identify speakers and resources. So create that, do create that advisory board that can kind of guide you. One of the things that I've had the pleasure of doing last year was 2 different organizations. When we came in, they had a chapter task force that was set up to do this, and we had some dynamic conversations in preparation for it, so a great opportunity. Plan for different levels of learners. You're going to have new chapter leaders and you're going to have veterans. One of the things when I say planning for this is, how are you matching up the veterans with the newbies? And I don't mean from the same chapter, I mean from different chapters, right? Are you having a, finance 101, and then if you have very large state-based organizations, finance for larger organizations? Are you asking the new presidents to have some time just to kind of have their own conversation? So you have different levels of learners. What are you doing to make a difference? So I would love you guys to jump in on that question too. How do you address these different levels of learners? I see a question: who has an online leadership forum? And what format do you use? Great, keep coming in with those. I know that Higher Logic, the platform, is the one we use with NIGP, and I know RAPS uses the Higher Logic platform too, and there are other ones, so jump in. Karen, yes, officers sitting together to share over lunch. Awesome, that's exactly the kind of examples that love to see you guys throw in here. The last thing is, okay, if I could say this once, if I could invert all of this, if I could take away the first 4 points, just follow this last one. Don't spend valuable conference time on passive informational sessions. It's Chinese food, as I said earlier. Chinese food is wonderful, but you know the old saying, I'm hungry an hour later. Adult learning tells us that if you sit there and just open someone's brain and pour information in, it stays in there for about 24 hours, and that's being very, very optimistic. So the question is, what can you do instead of those lovely passive opportunities? So go ahead, do me a favor. What do you do? Type that in there. I'm looking for some good examples. All right, let me get you thinking while you're doing it. So FPA, Financial Planning Association, they build into their program hives. That's right. What's a hive? It's a room busy with activity. And the first year, hive was just a place to go in and have conversations between events. But then this past year, they themed them. So the first hive, and let me pull up my things. The first hive was all around just staff. You could just go in, and they had tables with the staff, and you just had the opportunity: what staff member do I need to talk to? What question do I need to have? Another one was, the second one was on chapter size. So you got together by the size of your chapter. So the small, the mediums, and the largest got together. The third one was by your role, your chapter role. And what was really neat about this was they had a set of workshops, which were tactical, and they're based on 8 kind of chapter roles. Then you went in to the hives based on the chapter roles, and you had this great content that you now kind of chewed on a little bit. So it was really cool. So hives are one. I love icebreaker ideas. You guys jump in here on icebreaker ideas. NTMA, I was just with them in New Orleans. We did a scavenger hunt in the French Quarter, brought in this really cool company that does this stuff, and it was all app-based. We're running around the French Quarter. My team lost. You had to unlock where dinner was. Very, very cool. And the year before, crime scene. Had somebody come in, they were in teams to solve a crime. there's all kinds of really cool icebreakers. But the other kind of experiential thing that I saw that CAI, which is the Community Associations, on the day 2, now they do their conference in the same town as their city. So listen to this. They do a staff speed date. So the first day they're in a conference, a traditional kind of conference activity, right? And then the second day they come over to the office, and all the staff doors, and they do feet on the floor. They guide you from one staff office to the other. Rather than the staff coming to them, they go to the staff and they get to meet the staff, see the staff in the office. If they've got a question, the staff member has all their files and stuff right there and can just real quickly answer the question. So popular that they've continued it for several years in a row. Reach out to those gals. I don't know if one of them's on the call or not, but yes. Sandra says CAE rocks. They do. This is one of the most exciting. And here's the really cool thing about that. The staff get to see the leaders in small groups and hear from them and get these great conversations and get to know them. And now there's this kind of, oh, I know Sue from so-and-so, and she did such a great job. I'm going to use her for my next campaign start. I mean, it just awesome, just really creating an amazing opportunity. What else do you guys do? Speed dating sessions, great, from Karen, I love that. Peer group breakfast, yes. So Anne, great point that you made there. Works better if you have a facilitator at each table. Hands down, put the facilitator at the table, make sure the conversation stays on track. Love those, love those. Jill, good idea. Always bring the swag. Good way to do the topic. Oh yeah, the exhibit hall. Always build in some opportunity there for that. Were the hives going on during the conference or the breakout? Okay, great question. The first year the hives were going on, so you were able to just pop in when you needed to. The second one, they organized them more around breaks. I've done them at other places where, again, it's open and there'll be somebody in there to answer questions. The idea being in the Jeff Hurt world of if you're in a session that's not doing it for you, then the rule of 2 legs, get up and go and find something else. Or if you've had an incredible program and it makes sense just to go ahead and do that. So part of when you're deciding what we'll do, ask the question, where do you get your energy from? Puzzles, brain games. Can you add things like hiking or yoga or trivia? One group did an incredible Jeopardy where it was kind of fun. They did a Jeopardy, and it was highlighting all of the affinity partners. So people had to think, what do I know about the affinity partners to win? Morning yoga. I was with the diabetes educators, and for a couple of years, that's what we did. We offered a morning wake-up yoga. And speaking of that, this past year, rather than having a morning yoga, they did a stretch dance break. So in the middle of the day, they got everybody up, taught them a dance, and they had the whole room dancing. So where do you get your energy from? It could be something as simple, for those of you at CEX might have known, yes, Jeffrey, thank you, Sam. Good point, Nancy. For those of you at CEX, we had a playlist, right? And every session opened with its own theme song. So wherever that energy is from, find a way to make it happen. All right, where do you find your speakers and your facilitators? Okay, guys, go. Oh, Tony, good to see you. Barbershop Harmony, yes. I totally love it. Can we maybe hire you guys to come? Awesome. So where do you find speakers and facilitators? So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and type in where you found folks, how you found them, if you have anybody you'd recommend. And I'm going to suggest to you that there are so many options out there right in your own organizations and cross. So for example, one of the things that we had happen at CEX is somebody stood up and they said, we're doing a chapter leader conference. We have no budget. We'll be in Chicago. I want somebody to tell them how a board should act. I could tell them, but they don't want to listen to me. Someone from across the room that's located in Chicago raised her hand and said, I'd be happy to do an hour session on effective board practices. And in return, she got to stay for lunch and she got to come and take any other session she wanted. Okay? There's lots of ways to find good people. So you can look at your former and your current chapter leaders. Awesome people. I mean, they've been there, they've done that. They're going to have that wonderful empathetic connection with the groups. You can look at leaders from other associations, just as I referred to just a moment ago. You can look at subject matter experts, folks that you're going to bring in from the outside. So NIGP uses Leadership Outfitters to come in and do a leadership skills assessment. Lots of really great folks that are out there. But get beyond sort of the association speak area. Are there subject matter experts that can come in and do other things? So for example, do you have an affinity partner who really knows about, for example, communication? So I was at a conference where they use MemberClicks as one of the main AMS groups that the folks use, and they brought in someone from MemberClicks to talk about an effective communication process for promoting events. So there are subject matter experts that may be related to different products and services you have or from your community. So another example from a community, I was working with a group. They were doing some leadership development, and they have somebody who actually used to work on staff that now does some consulting, really developing the core competencies for their particular profession. They brought that person on to talk about developing your own skills. So lots of subject matter experts when you get outside the box a little bit. And the last suggestion here, and I sort of mentioned this already, are industry partners, but get outside the box on the industry partners. I think that there's a great opportunity to bring folks in that can do, that know effective practices. And they want to get in front of your folks and meet your folks and be around your folks and know your folks, but if they don't want to go up and do a sales pitch. And how many of you just hate when you ask somebody to do something and it's a sales pitch? So instead, get them to do a session where people just get to know them and build a relationship. Laura, love that idea. When you have that steering committee, you're able to both mind them to be part of the program as well as get ideas. Yes, indeed. Vital Smarts. Yes, Karen. Perfect. Crucial Conversations and Confrontations, I think, is a wonderful session. I've seen people do really, really wonderful. Oh, Karen, you have a lot of great ideas. Yes, TED Talks, YouTube, referrals. Oh, excellent ideas. All of those can help you find just the right person that you need to bring in. I want to pause for just a moment. I'm going to ask you a question and type in, but I want to add something to that. The question is, how much do you involve your chapter leaders in planning of the conference? And looking for some ways beyond maybe asking them to be on a conference committee. Are there other ways that you go ahead and get people involved? And while you're doing that, I want to make a sort of a comment. When you're using chapter leaders, when you're using people who are not trained presenters, give them the support that they can use and need and can benefit from. And what do I mean by giving them the support? So I'm talking about, can you get on the phone with them? Can you coach them? Can you build the slide deck with them? Can you have an opportunity to have a quick rehearsal before they have to go on? One of the things that we've done a number of times is very successful, and I've seen other people do it because you steal all good ideas from somebody, is do the interviewer approach. So at CAI, I had a great group of people to work with there. And rather than having the leaders get up and prepare presentations and do a whole panel thing or do a separate thing, instead we interviewed them, got some good ideas from them, brought them up. They did the speaking, but all I did was ask the questions, direct the audience responses. So I said I was Oprah, and it was my version of The View, and we sat around on stools, and we had a great conversation. And the neat thing is that I was picking their brains, but they didn't have to prepare for it, other than I after interviewing each one of them, I told them I thought what cool points I really wanted them to bring so they knew. But basically, it took the pressure off of these leaders, and it assured that they were ready. Yes, it was great. So how much do you involve your chapter leaders? And we'll move off of that topic for just a moment. I mean, we could talk about this element forever, but I want to make a couple of other points before we close today. So how do you involve? We have the training sessions. Oh, Tracy, awesome. Before the conference. Tracy, you really need to tell us a little bit more about those training sessions. Okay, so you surveyed, asked them the challenges. Great. Someone else said that they, of course, do. Lots of you have some kind of a group that's working. Oh, you involve the speaker and speaker-elect, folks that have been regional directors. Great. You know, and really cool if you've got a bunch of people that are visiting, like NIGP as chapter ambassadors. If you've got people that are out there visiting the chapters, and they're giving you notes back, you might want to, you know, ask them to ask a question or two, you know, when they're out there. By the way, ask, you know, what are people looking to have? Martha uses a group. Excellent, excellent. So one of the things that is kind of interesting, and we're actually going to try this with CEX this year, we're going to have people do a poll, an ongoing poll, where you're going to rate how important topics are, so we can assure that the top topics get the most popular topics get the most time on the CEX agenda. So I'm just giving you a heads up, because if you're going to come to CEX, you're going to be asked to opt into some polls so that you can have the opportunity to help curate the content for this particular thing. But have any of you tried that? Have any of you tried just doing a, you know, vote in the top topics? Because that certainly is one way. Do any of you do an RFP process? In other words, say here's the content that we think we're looking for, and then ask people to submit product ideas, session ideas, because that is another interesting way. That's how we do our main session. So do we do that? Do we do that do you guys do that? You do live polling at the end of the day, Sophia. That's pretty cool. I love getting the chapter leaders involved before, during, and after the closing. All right. So let's talk about, because at the end of the day, we can have fun, and we can come up with all kinds of ways to beef up the agenda. But you know, we don't want to make this a missed opportunity from the national organization's perspective, and we do need the buy-in in order to actually be able to address those obstacles that we talked about. So let's talk a little bit about National's involvement. I really believe that the one-day face-to-face is a unique opportunity for staff to build relationships with leaders. And I think this is also national leaders to develop with local leaders, but it's a great opportunity for your national organization to get these closer relationships with chapter leaders. NIGP, for example, we were just talking about it, and they bring their national leaders and some staff, and they're involved all day long and all the day and a half, quiet, more in the observatory role, but an opportunity to get to meet people and talk with them and see how they're going. And this is a great opportunity for staff. One of the ways that we've done it is I've seen a couple of different ways. Again, you steal good ideas from when you see them, and then you try them and you see, then you're hooked on the idea. We do the connectivity zone, something that came out of Cal SAE at some point. And then I saw another version of it, and we've been using it. And it's a really cool way where you take, in 4 or 5 groups, you split the group, and they go and they have a conversation around a topic. Worked really well at NTMA. We had staff were the facilitators in each of those groups, and it was the staff that had the responsibility related to that. So the membership staff person, the meetings person, the diversity and inclusion person. So they were told that they're facilitating. So they are making sure the conversation is robust, that they're hearing from folks, that they're seeing who's doing effective practices, that they're gathering questions, and where appropriate, you know, providing resources and input. But it gave an opportunity for these staff to be able to meet folks. So it's a building relationship. This is where it talks about providing expert advice. But I did see at FPA, for example, their membership team does an amazing job with both the retention side and the acquisition side, and they did some tactical workshops that were really great because they were able to be the lead on that. But I also love this idea that we've seen, which is talk to the expert session. Sort of like the chapter hive with staff, right? It's an opportunity for folks to talk with or get to know the national staff, to get to know the chapter leaders. Finally, and this is really important, this is an opportunity for you to get chapter buy-in on things that are coming. Now, I've seen this done really wrong, and I've seen this done really right. But remembering that your chapters are part and parcel of the organization's success in doing many of its initiatives, whether it's a new certification program, maybe it's a new brand, maybe it's shifting the conversation, maybe it's an advocacy issue, whatever it is, you're going to need these people, your troops, right, the feet on the street, to be able to be part of this change, move this initiative forward. So this is an opportunity, and I don't mean this is an opportunity to have a fully formed program and then launch it in their face. We're talking about the fact that this is an opportunity for you to do things that will allow people to have a voice, maybe in the definition of the new initiative, to find their own role in moving that initiative forward, or to being trained on how to move that initiative forward. And I want to just point again to an organization that I've seen in this last conference. They did some really good jobs. They were making a big shift in there. Can't speak to the shift, but a big shift in how they were aligning their chapter organizations and their national organizations and all the other moving parts of their association, and talking about the changes in membership and being more dynamic. And they started these conversations in kind of town hall and some session stuff for a couple of years, and then this last year they had an incredible rollout. But the neat thing is that they did a kind of a town hall rollout, and they had everybody that was involved that could speak to different parts of this change up on a dais, but they had them in chairs, so it was informal. They each kind of spoke, and then they had a facilitated Q&A. It was really a wonderful opportunity for National to get the chapter leaders involved. So you can create chapter champions if you take the time to do this. At the town hall, you can, not just for change, but you can talk about things like, what's affecting the National and the chapters. That's this organization, FPA. They did that first. They started that. What are the things that need to change? Then you can get a sense of how chapters feel about these changes. You can also hear what's going to scare them. So with diabetes educators, they did a major chapter remodel a number of years ago. And one of their chapter leaders, part of what they did was they listened to find out what the scare was, and they were able to address that in future webinars and other activities. And you can help folks begin to see the opportunities if they adapt to the changes. Finally, you also have the opportunity, of course, to show them what would happen if they don't adapt. So it's not so much that you're shoving something down the chapter leaders' throats, but if you use this chapter leader conference in part as a way to bring along chapter champions, to develop chapter champions for almost anything, you are going to be able to create that groundswell, that voice, that energy around it. So I bet some of you have used their chapter leader conferences for things like this, and I'd love to have you sort of share here as well. Should town halls be hosted during the process? At the beginning, just an idea. So my recommendations, and I think FPA is an example, I know AADE was an example, is to use this opportunity, if you have a regular meeting of your chapter leaders, to use this opportunities throughout the process. And it may take more or less time. So you may just have a small session that's a Q&A session at the beginning, or you may have a trend session in which you then ask them questions that relate to that trend. And then as you get involved in the process, keeping them engaged, maybe if it's an advocacy program, let's just say you're developing a position that's going to be really significant, you're moving something forward, and you've used the trends issues to get their buy-in on all of that. And then the next time around, you've got everything, and you're doing a training session. You're saying, here's the tools we have. Let us put you through the training, and then you give us some good feedback around these tools. Are they great? So yeah, I think you can use it at various parts of that process. I think that one of the things you have to do is remember that when you are using this as an opportunity as a part of the change management process, it is going to flavor the rest of your event. So be judicious in how you fit this into an overall flow of the event. You want the chapter leader conference to always be focused on the chapter leader. And you want, however you're going to do this, you want this to be bringing them into the process, if that makes sense. Great question. Anybody else use this as chapter champions to get chapter leaders really engaged? Oh, Gwen, great. This is this is a great example. A national dialogue over a multi-year plan to engage leaders in the redesign. So that's exactly what we're talking about is, you can use this conference as part of that. On the flip side, it could be something that's really exciting, like there was one group that they were doing a whole industry public awareness campaign, and so they did a whole session on how, on effective practice of public awareness, and they trained people on how to use the tools, and I actually gave out a thumb drive that had all the tools on it. So that's also part of the process as well. Great dialogue, you guys. We're gonna have to save the chat, right, Bill Highway, because there's some good stuff in here that we're going to want to be able to share back with all of you, because it's a huge part, I think, of this sharing time we've got here. All right. So let me just ask a rating poll. Again, 1 star to 5. How would you rate your conference's on its ability to help chapter leaders implement new ideas? Okay. So this is on, I brought them in, I've kept them for a day or a day and a half or 2.5 days, based on the ability. So you might pick a 1 if you don't even know if they do new ideas, or a 1 if you know that they don't. You might pick 5 if you've seen the outgrowth of those new ideas. You might pick something in between if you feel like, yeah, I get a little bit of adoption, but not a whole lot. Okay. So we've got about 10 minutes, and this is, I think, one of the most important things we can talk about today. Oh, I love, Tasha says, we're getting better. Oh, Tracy, yes, you have that wonderful chapter advancement team, and I love it, 4 on our way to 4.5. That is great. So I'm going to ask you guys to also then do me a favor and log in on how or some of the ways that you're making this happen as we talk a little bit more about how some effective practices in making this happen. And Tracy, if you can, it would be interesting for you to type a little bit more about the chapter advancement team. I'm not putting you on the spot, but HFMA does some really cool things, and I would love to have you share that. Incidentally, and I hope she doesn't mind if I shout this out, what's really cool in some ways is Tracy's background comes from the profession and being a chapter leader, so she really kind of understands and gets it. Ask Tracy to send comments to all panelists and attendees. Okay. Yes, I see. Okay. Thanks for that. I'm reading Tracy. I'm going, Tracy, this is awesome. Tracy, do it to panelists and attendees so they can see the very cool stuff that you're doing. Okay. Okay. Me stop talking. Well, me sort of stop talking. Let's get on to the next slide. So if you want them to be able to turn ideas into actions, you got to do interactive activities. And that includes ones in which they're idea sharing and they get to try those ideas on. It includes problem solving where they get really good, tangible, I can act on these tomorrow. Not these big theoretical things like, I need to build membership. Well, to build membership, you ought to have a membership strategy. No, that's good, but if you want ideas into actions, have them really work on specific, tangible, I can take this home and do it. Do peer-to-peer exercises. So you're building that in as a way, if you take someone who's done an amazing new member welcome plan, sitting down and sharing that, being able to talk about why it worked, being able to pull out the concepts and the specific tools to be able to do that. Have folks, solve problems together. Maybe there's a problem that no one has an answer to, but you can collectively develop that answer. We do a solution circle at a number of groups in which you state your problem, and then we go around the table and you build answers or solutions to it. And then they have this sheet of paper on the table with all these great ideas that they can take home and act on. Walk-in talks are a great way of taking a session and then allowing folks to be able to take what they've heard, find the aha, share it with someone, noodle on it, and make it their own. So the way you might do a walk-in talk is, rather than having, a lot of us do 75-minute sessions, or even for that matter, 60-minute sessions. Cut it down and allow the last 5 to 7 minutes for people to pair up, get up out of their seat, walk to the next event or activity, and have a conversation. Give them a leading question or two to take them out of the room to have a conversation. So what was the one thing that I heard that I have a deeper question about, or I really liked, or I want to act on? And they share that, and just that action of sharing allows them to begin to put some solid plans in their mind. The Hive we talked about, and I just wanted to put it here because that's a great way, and I love, like I said, what we did at FPA. The staff had you go to these tactical workshops and then go into a Hive on that topic. So now you were just doing what did we learn and how do we use it? And get them outdoors. A number of years ago, did a session, we were at a golf course, and and we actually had breakouts that were outside. We had a couple breakouts. They actually went out on the veranda and had an opportunity to do that. But the outdoor activities can be also, the scavenger hunt that we did with NTMA was certainly an outdoor activity. So a lot of really cool ways to get outside and have some things have a different view and a different atmosphere. All right. The other aspect of this, so you can have interactive activities, and that's really important, and we just gave you a couple of ideas, but the other part that's really critical is to discuss the metrics. So in other words, if you want them to know if you want them to act, then help them understand how action should be measured, because that's going to help them both create to-do lists and action items that'll make a difference, but they can also see progress on. So the first thing would be, for you to think in terms of what's to be expected of them, and how does that translate to the information and the knowledge, the resources that you're giving them. What are the metrics around how the chapter is performing? So sometimes you might say, if your chapter if one of the metrics you guys are looking at is chapter engagement, how are you measuring that? And then if you're talking about how you're measuring that, then clearly you want to be able to show them, and then maybe give them a benchmark that they can strive against. How are your program products and projects performing? So this gets down to a specific thing, and I love, again, HFMA, the groups up there. They do surveys on all of the events, and they help people see what the outcome, what they're getting, what their event evaluations are all about. So they get a chance to be able to see, we have this event, this is the evaluation we're getting over time, we're getting this set of evaluation numbers, or we've got an evaluation that's not quite working and we need to do something a little bit differently. So discussing how they're going to know these events are successful will allow them to create events that they can then measure against metrics that are actionable. Finally, I mean, I think the other kind of interesting thing that we don't always address here, but is the notion of helping them understand whether initiatives that are older or could be newer, if they're worth their limited time and money. So what I mean by this is that, so sometimes you get into a conference and you're spinning ideas, and so people go home with this huge list of ideas, right? And they think everybody should do all of these things, and we know that they can't. And part of it is giving them a little bit around, how do I decide if this event or this activity or this program is going to make a difference for me? How do I decide it's right for me, right? I've also seen, and I was at one conference where they did a whole session on how to sunset programs, and they had a couple of exec directors talking about the metrics that they use to get rid of the golf tournament, okay, to get rid of the gala or the casino night, or to stop offering dinner meetings. So help the people, give them the metrics, the measurements, the tools to know, how do I decide that this is right for me, but also how do I sunset things, because I just heard a whole bunch of really cool things over here, and I can't put anything else on my event schedule unless I take something off. So if any of you are already giving people metrics, go ahead and add that. Let's talk a little bit about what metrics you're getting. You guys are giving some great conversation over here. Let me expand my window a little bit. I've got a Zoom. I've got so many windows going. Here we go. Speed bowling. Oh, I love it. Is team bowling for a specific time frame as fast as they can. They create brackets. Good. Yes, you share it with me, Tracy. I'll steal the idea, and then I'll give it to everybody else to steal. I love it. So, Jill, that is great. So you asked in a post-leadership event, what one thing did they learn that they knew they could take back? And they also, it was the most eye-opening thing that they could do or they wanted to do. That's kind of neat. I like what is the one thing that you knew that you could go back? And then it'd be neat, do you go back and perhaps check in and make sure they've done that? All right. Last thing I want to say about this, because we're going to run out of time. This has been a super conversation. You guys are doing some amazing chat stuff here, is that it really helps to give your leaders tools during the event to make sure that they can capture those ideas. Definitely do a worksheet. I know we want to do handouts. They need less handouts of lots of content and more worksheets that help them break down projects into next steps. They need timelines to help them stay on schedule. Help them build an action list. So at CEX, I don't know how many of you were at CEX, but let me see if I can show this to you guys on the screen a little bit, if you can see it. It may not be coming out very great, but listen, this is what we did. We had you do an action plan and a complete time, and you created the idea and you said a due date, who would benefit from this, what are the obstacles, and who should be involved. So give folks these kinds of easy worksheets that help them create timelines to stay on schedule. Help them find accountability partners. Show them where the resources. Don't download them don't overload them rather with resources, but show them where they can find those resources. All right. Let's pull through two final ideas as we move on. And there's Martha. I mean, I love that. We asked attendees to complete a self-addressed postcard with 3 things they wanted to apply at the state chapter. We are mailing them back 30 days post-conference. Martha, that's the idea I love to hear. I'm writing that down right now. That's the idea I'm taking from there. Beautiful, great idea. Okay. Make sure, and I want to emphasize this, we've talked everything about the face-to-face single event. It is not a single event. It can't be a single event. Make sure that you're building it to be more than a single event. Here are 5 ways that you can do just that. If any of you use any of these ways, share now. We'd love to find out what you're using. But you know what? It's really, really important that we don't view this in an isolated way, that we don't see this as a one-up opportunity, but rather we really help our leaders be able to continue the learning. So if you have an online community, it's a great way to use that. I've watched some of the stuff that RAPS has done. They actually do a live chat in addition to their webinars. You can do a follow-up chat from a face-to-face community, from a face-to-face event. Great ways of doing it, capturing that information, and videotaping on site, and then putting it online. Okay. So remember, a chapter leadership gives you the opportunity to support volunteer leaders to inspire that shared sense of purpose and to strengthen your mission. At the end of the day, that's going to happen. If you remove the obstacles, you design an experience, you get the national involved, and you help your leaders turn ideas into actions. Wow, this has been fast-paced. I don't like doing all the talking, but I am really awesome. I'm so excited you guys did all the typing. This has been an incredible conversation, even if I'm the only one chatting. I know that we're out of time, so I'm going to skip over that slide, unfortunately, and I apologize. But you guys have been doing all the questions in there anyway. I got to tell you a couple things. Will you have access to the presentation? Yes, Olivia, you will absolutely have access to the presentation. And I can tell you also that that we will also, if you've got any examples, and I'm going to put a challenge out there. Here's a challenge for you guys. If you've got a sample from any of your leadership conferences, it's an agenda, it's a worksheet that you've used. If you send them to Bill Highway, we're gonna, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna pick out a winner, and we're gonna get a discount coupon to this incredible CEX Association Component Exchange, October 26, 2018. I hope that's okay. I just made that up, but I am sure. Oh, of course, Bree, thank you. So it's going to be in Arlington, Virginia. It's going to be the same place it was last year. It is going to be awesome. And we're going to have a party the night before for those of you that have to fly in. We're going to have a party the night of. It's going to be fun. Oh, guys. And listen, the leveragechapters.com, we're updating it as we go. Exciting. That's not the only thing that's happening. We've got chapter roundtable. Listen to me, I love these Bill Highway folks. Can I just be part of the team full time? Anyway, we got chapter roundtables. We got them in Chicago. Got them in Alexandria, we got them in DC, we got them in Reston, and sorry about that, we have the webinar on the 1st. So the next webinar is on March 1st. We are so excited. This has been a rolling good time. Thank you all. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Listen, guys, have fun. Stay warm if you're in a cold spot, and send us your stuff, and be with us at a roundtable coming near you or the webinar on March 1st. Hey, Bill Highway staff, we good?